Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the final part of the Metal Gear Solid Marathon. It had been 4 years since Snake Eater was released, and it was widely considered to be the best in the series. But it was about time for the then new PlayStation 3 to get some of the action, and that was exactly what we got in 2008 with Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. Oh man, do I remember seeing the announcements and trailers for this game. At this point, I was already a very big fan of Snake Eater and quite interested in the Metal Gear Solid series in general. And coincidentally, on the same year I played and finished Snake Eater for the first time, Metal Gear Solid 4 was around the corner. Only this time it was on the PS3. But unfortunately, I was stuck with an Xbox 360 for several years, and since Guns of the Patriots was using this fancy schmancy Blu-ray technology that the PS3 had, it proved to be too powerful for the Xbox, and it really tore me up inside that I couldn't play it. I'm sorta glad this happened though, because if it wasn't for Metal Gear Solid 1 and the release of the HD collection, I would have had no idea what was going on in Metal Gear Solid 4. Though it also made me cringe even more that I still didn't own a PS3. I mean, this was not only a Metal Gear Solid game I hadn't played yet, but it was the game that was going to conclude the entire saga. Well, until Metal Gear Rising came out, but it's debatable whether we count that. Then finally, in 2013, on my 18th birthday, I got a PlayStation 3, and the very first game I got with it, along with Uncharted 2, was Metal Gear Solid 4. How come the case is red for this one? I've never figured that out. Needless to say, I went straight into Guns of the Patriots, and I only managed to get as far as sneaking past the first group of enemies before the game kept crashing on me. Then my dad and I spent the whole day trying to figure out the problem, only to find that the hard drive was broken and I had to use a new one. Not the best birthday I had, but I had awesome gifts, so I couldn't complain. Okay, I think I bored you enough with the backstory, let's get on with it. Like I said, Metal Gear Solid 4 is set at the end of the main timeline, and is a direct sequel to Sons of Liberty. It took Konami 7 years to continue from Metal Gear Solid 2. Was it worth the wait? Does the story come to a satisfying end? Or is it about as disappointing of a conclusion as Tomb Raider Underworld? So the game for some reason starts off with made-up TV shows and commercials before it actually begins, one of them being an interview with David Hayter himself. I guess this is supposed to represent the advertisements you see before a movie starts in the cinemas, but it also acts like a TV show because you're able to switch between channels. I don't know, I'm confused. Including the David Hayter interview, some of the shows try to add a bit of comedy to make it more entertaining, but frankly I don't find any of them to be that funny. I just want the damn game to start. Guns of the Patriots takes place 5 years after the events of Sons of Liberty and 9 years after the events of the original Metal Gear Solid. In the year 2014, where Ocelot has turned the whole world into a giant war zone. It's okay to me. If you remember back in Sons of Liberty though, Ocelot was somehow possessed by Liquid, which is why he's now known in this game as Liquid Ocelot, despite everybody else just calling him Liquid. Instead of 2 chapters we need to go through, like in Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, we now have 5, excluding the Epilogue that lasts around 2 or 3 hours each. For the first time since Metal Gear Solid 1, we finally take control of Solid Snake again without being replaced an hour in this time. In the first mission briefing cutscene you can access before starting the game, Colonel Campbell requests for Snake to go to the Middle East and terminate Liquid. Unsurprisingly, he agrees and heads on out. This same cutscene also introduces Olga's child that Raiden rescued in Metal Gear Solid 2 named Sunny, a little girl who, while not a good talker, is incredibly knowledgeable about computers. This is mostly because she, Snake, and Otacon have been living inside a large aircraft called the Nomad, and Sunny has never been outside. Sunny's a pretty cool character most of the time, with her shyness and short fuse with Snake, but I feel that there are a few times where she tries a bit too hard to be the cute and innocent one to the players. As you've most likely noticed at this point, thanks to the Foxdie virus from the original Metal Gear Solid, Snake is suffering from rapid aging, and now known to the players as Old Snake, with no cure to help him. But being the stubborn man that he is, he still goes to the Middle East and tries to search for Liquid. In the midst of gunfire, we're then introduced to another type of Metal Gear called Geckos that aren't able to launch nukes but are very agile and pack a huge punch. As intimidating as they are, however, the mooing noises that they make are pretty silly. After shortly sneaking past the gecko, Snake's job is to then meet up with Otacon's new invention called the Metal Gear Mark II, which is mainly used for investigating an area and even stunning guards before going through with Snake, but I surprisingly never use this, which is a shame because it seems like an interesting idea. Anyway, once Snake comes across the Mark II, it gives him a couple of working pistols and the new Solid Eye, obviously representing Big Boss's eye patch. The Solid Eye is essentially this game's radar that also comes with its own binoculars, as well as a combination of the night vision and thermal goggles. Snake needs to then get together with one of the Rat Patrol units, who are a group of rebels against Liquid's tyranny, whereby a big freaking coincidence, the one that Snake is told to work with is led by Meryl from the first Solid game, and one of her teammates happens to be Johnny, in addition to Name Not Important and Name Not Important. Meryl then explains that every single mercenary since after the Big Shell incident has nanomachines injected that give them incredible senses in combat and the ability to easily communicate with their comrades. This is all kept controlled by a system known as Sons of the Patriots, which Liquid plans to hijack. Weapons and items also have ID tags that only specific nanomachines can access, which is where the walking gameplay mechanic Drebin comes into play. By having a surplus of ammo for your weapons, you earn Drebin points, which you can then exchange to either unlock IDs on guns you pick up and allow you to use them, or buy completely new weapons and items and stock up on bullets from Drebin's shop, in addition to being able to buy accessories to further improve some of your guns, like an added grip for more accuracy, a scope to tell more easily where you're going to shoot, or a ridiculously useless flashlight since there are hardly any dark areas that you need to travel through. Ladies and gentlemen, there is now a merchant in a Metal Gear Solid game. Let that be a warning to you. You can access Drebin's shop at any time from the pause menu, so unlike Resident Evil 4, you don't need to worry about meeting with Drebin in specific locations to access the store. Aside from the perishable items, a lot of the stuff you could buy from Drebin is pretty expensive. You can always play the game on a Sunday or at the 5th chapter to get better deals, but even then it'll take quite a long time to buy everything. Like, how the hell are you supposed to get enough points to buy the stealth camouflage and bandana? I know it's only a matter of multiple playthroughs, but that's a lot of playthroughs you need to do. I'll just stick to not getting caught and tranquilizing people to unlock them, thanks. Not only are the weapons very pricey, but a lot of them function very similarly to each other, even with the added accessories. I think the MSX games and Metal Gear Solid 1 handle the weapon layout the best, since you were holding one type of each gun. It's incredibly simple, but it works very well. Having so many weapons and guns of the Patriots when I'm most likely just gonna stick with one type to me just feels a bit cluttered. I'm sure a lot of shooter veterans may disagree with this, but I don't think shooting is supposed to be the main attraction to a Metal Gear Solid game. Aside from Drebin's store, there's actually not that much to talk about in terms of new gameplay features. The one that's most apparent, however, is the control. I will say this now, even after playing Ground Zeroes, this to me is the best control scheme ever implemented in a Metal Gear game. I'm extremely late for saying this, but no, the older Metal Gear Solids don't use L1 to aim and R1 to shoot. Guns of the Patriots does. In the original, except for the rocket launchers, you have to hold down the square button and turn Snake to where you want to aim. Sons of Liberty and Snake Eater has a similar mechanic, but you can also shoot in first person by holding down the R1 button to enter first person mode, and then press the square button to aim your gun and let go of square to shoot. It's a very odd control scheme, but bear in mind that this was before Resident Evil 4 came along and changed the way we aim and shoot. Old Snake, however, controls beautifully. As well as adapting Big Boss's CQC techniques and camera control from the last game, he now aims from an over-the-shoulder perspective like in other third-person shooters, and you can finally move while aiming, making it much easier to land kills. You also need to use the triangle button to stick to walls now, so there should never be a time that you find yourself accidentally clinging onto walls when you were just trying to crouch behind cover. And speaking of that, you can now move while you're crouching, so you no longer have to stay still in order to do so without unintentionally crawling on the floor. Snake can even shoot from beside cover. Not over it, unfortunately, but this is certainly a lot better. He's also able to play dead to fool guards, but I almost never have to use this, and I don't often use this new ability of crawling inch by inch past enemies, though I do like to think of it as Snake performing a mediocre worm dance. Like in Snake Eater, your health will slowly regenerate depending on the conditions that you're in, but you don't have to hunt for food anymore to recover stamina. It's back to good old rations that you find lying on the floor. As gross as it is, it doesn't sound nearly as bad as the Belmont family eating chicken behind walls. The cure mechanic is nowhere to be seen either, so you no longer need to worry about patching yourself up if you take heavy damage. Instead of a stamina meter, we now have the psych meter, although it's spelled psyche, so I don't know why the characters refer to it as the psych meter. Anyway, it has sort of a similar function to the stamina meter, but it more or less derives from Snake's mental state. Stuff like when he's shivering in cold environments, suffering from backaches, or anxiety of having to get by a large group of enemies. I've never had a time where I ran out of psych, however, because I always have an item that I use to relieve Snake's stress or fix his back problems. Because of that, I've never found out what happens if the psych meter goes all the way down, and this was also the case with Stamina and Snake Eater. Returning from Snake Eater, however, is the camouflage system, now in the form of the Octo Camo. You can still pick out any bits of camouflage and costumes you'd like to use for whatever situation you're in, but by staying still for a little bit of time with the Octo Camo, it'll turn Snake's suit into whatever terrain he's currently on, like a chameleon. And later on in the game, you get the Face Camo to provide you slightly more coverage than ever before. This is pretty damn awesome. Never again will you be intruded by menus to change camouflage, as the Octo Camo does it for you, making for some faster paced gameplay. Well, compared to Snake Eater anyway, and I hope to see this again in future games. The last new mechanic is a bit small. Snake is able to pick sides with either the Rebels or Liquid's forces by neutralizing the opposite team. This sounds like an interesting idea, but it's actually quite underplayed. Otacon tells you that there's no point in getting into a fight with either side, but Liquid's men still see me as an enemy, so naturally I take them out. The Rebels, on the other hand, only stop me briefly, and all I need to do is just stand still and let them figure me out before they let me go. So it's pretty obvious who this game wants me to go with. Not only that, but the level design loves to place them right before Snake infiltrates a combat zone, making this whole mechanic utterly redundant, especially since it's only present in the first 2 chapters. In the later 3, it's Snake all on his own. Guns of the Patriots also gives us a new type of enemy to confront against called Frog Soldiers, agile women who are able to cling onto walls and sneak their own way around to look for Snake. It's a rather unique idea to include them, but they're a pain in the ass to deal with every time you come across them. Thankfully though, there are only a few sections in the game where you have to deal with them, and some of those sections are straight out action sequences, but when you do have to sneak by them, it can be incredibly frustrating. So while Snake is looking for Liquid, he comes across this game's Foxhound, Dead Cell, and Cobra unit known as the Beauty and the Beast Corps. Each of their designs are based around previous Metal Gear Solid bosses but given their own twist, and they all have names similar to the Foxhound members from the original PS1 game. Laughing Octopus, Raging Raven, Crying Wolf, and Screaming Mantis. While not the most original of bosses, right off the bat they're pretty intimidating as you see them create a bloodbath as soon as you're introduced to them. After that, Snake and Meryl then encounter Liquid Ocelot, who somehow reprograms the nanomachines to cause everybody to go crazy. Naomi, of all people, then drops in to keep Snake's nanomachines at bay, ending the first chapter. Naomi then needs to be rescued in the second chapter as she's being forced to do research for Liquid. While Snake begins to look for her, he sees that Vamp is unfortunately still alive because apparently killing him in Sons of Liberty was too much to ask. Seriously, dude, take the hint. There isn't a single player that thought you were a good character. Shouldn't you still be drowning in the big shell somewhere? Hold on, let me check this.
I'll pick my own name and my own life.
Oh, you crafty bastard. So after Snake does some more sneaking around in suburban plains and a mansion, he eventually manages to meet up with Naomi. Whoa, you might want to do up your lab coat there. Sorry. Anyway, she explains that the Foxdie virus in him will mutate after 6 months, where at that point, Snake will spread an extremely deadly version of the virus to the population. It's around this point where you see that the cutscenes in Metal Gear Solid 4 are some of the longest the series has had so far. You already need a lot of patience to get through the other Solid games, but here's where it gets a bit ridiculous. I don't really mind this too much because most of them are filled with fast-paced action and stunning visuals, and unlike Metal Gear Solid 2, important plot elements aren't told through needless codec conversations. But there are a few cutscenes where waiting patiently for gameplay does ask a little too much from me. Particularly when you first meet Drebin and go through the mission briefings in between chapters. Drebin could easily introduce himself in the shopping mechanic in around a paragraph or two, but chooses to try and look cool for the audience when he's really just a tool, only to have the purpose of injecting Snake with nanomachines that allow him access to modern weaponry. And the mission briefings mainly act to add some character development, which is good, but only shortly do they actually talk about the mission at hand. What's that? Liquid's about to make his next mark? Well, there's no need to worry about that yet. Make way for Otacon and Naomi getting together, even though they barely know each other. Though, admittedly, it is more believable than the whole Sniper Wolf thing in the original Solid game. Metal Gear Solid 4 also takes itself a lot more seriously than the other games. There are plenty of moments where the characters talk in cryptic riddles and very rarely crack a joke, as well as there having hardly any Easter eggs in the game. And even then, most of them are just flashbacks you can activate by walking into a certain spot, as if Snake has voices in his head or something. Other than that, the only proper Easter eggs you'll come across is Sonny bringing out a PS3 and playing one of Kojima's games on a PSP, in addition to being able to change camera angles and control the Mark II and the Nomad, and being able to use different face camos representing certain characters. There are a fair few secret codec conversations you can activate like in the other Metal Gear Solid games, but they're nowhere near as humorous as they were before. I think this is mostly because Snake Eater already set the bar with its funny dialogue and poking fun of itself, and that's a really tough act to follow. In fact, the codec in general isn't really used that often, and the only two people you can contact in the whole game are Otacon and eventually Rose from Sons of Liberty to help Snake's psych meter. You don't even use the codec to save anymore, which is a shame because I always liked the idea of having the characters wish you luck after you saved. I'm all for having a serious Metal Gear Solid game, they certainly do it well if it's required, and this game is no exception, but one of the main reasons I got into the series in the first place was because Kojima and the other developers realized that it was based on stupid action movies and had a lot of fun with it. But they also spent just as much time trying to be serious and getting players engaged with the characters. Guns of the Patriots seems like it's focusing too much on being edgy and deep rather than witty and comical, which again is fine, but it's not something I prefer, and that's a big reason that I don't play a lot of the millions and millions of shooters lying around in today's game industry. You'll also come to notice that Guns of the Patriots loves to bring back most of the major protagonists for the other games. Colonel Campbell, Naomi, Mei Ling, Rosemary, and...
Snake. It's my turn to protect you.
Oh, really? You're bringing him back? Ugh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, Raiden makes a comeback, now in the form of a cyborg ninja. God, he's just gonna be as annoying as before, and they knew that barely anybody liked him, so why did they even bother to bring him back? Holy hell! Well, go Raiden. Okay, where was this guy when I needed him in Sons of Liberty? I mean, talk about a complete 180. Yeah, the outfit's a bit ridiculous and he still acts like a douche a couple of times, but damn, this is a huge improvement.
You too, immortal.
No. I just don't fear death.
So anyway, Raiden tries to fight off Vamp, but ultimately fails in doing so and ends up horribly injured as soon as he and the others escape. He then requests for Snake to look for someone under the name Big Mama in Eastern Europe. While they're heading there in Chapter 3, Naomi finds out that Big Mama and a resistance group have equipment that can heal Raiden and are also keeping hold of Big Boss's remains, and Liquid plans to use Big Boss's DNA to hack into the Sons of the Patriots system and allow him control over every single weapon in the world. Snake then pointlessly disguises as his younger self using the face camo in order to get past the security gate. I say pointlessly because he gets himself into trouble almost immediately and Meryl has to come and save him anyway, so what was the point? Anyway, Snake needs to then search and follow one of Big Mama's resistance members to her location. Now the gameplay so far has been your traditional stealth gameplay with a couple of shooting sequences in between, which have been pretty enjoyable, but there are a few moments in this game where I generally don't have a good time. You resistance members, I hate you! I thought that following Naomi's footprints was bad, but this just takes on a whole new level of bad level design. Here is what is essentially most of Chapter 3's gameplay, and it almost breaks every rule in the book of how not to make a good sneaking segment. It's too damn slow, it's too damn dull, it takes for freaking ever, there's barely anything to get in your way, and if you get caught by the resistance member, you have to look for another one and start from the beginning of the area. This is hands down the worst part to any Metal Gear Solid game I have ever played. At least dragging Emma around the big shell only lasted for a few short rooms, but these few rooms are way too big and almost lifeless. And since you're progressing at a snail's pace, it gets very boring very quickly. Not to mention that this sort of gameplay has been done to death in other games, and the whole time I was praying for this part to end. But when you finally reach the end, you see that Big Mama is actually Eva from the last game, who has somehow gotten worse at doing Upper Jacket. It turns out that she was the surrogate mother that gave birth to Solid and Liquid during the Les Enfants Terribles project, and that she has kept Big Boss's remains for many years. She then tells Snake about the Snake Eater mission and what happened after that. After Naked Snake killed the boss in the last game, he and Major Zero had a big debate about what her dying wish was. They both agreed that she wanted them to create the Patriots along with Eva, Ocelot, Paramedic, and Sigint, but Big Boss believed that the intended purpose for the Patriots was to help those in need, while Major Zero thought it was for complete control. Oh my god, they seriously can't be going with this. So because Big Boss and Major Zero couldn't come to terms with each other, they decided to have a big war, thus causing all of the problems we have been facing throughout the entire series. No, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. That's a horrible plot device. Major Zero was a really good friend to Snake, and he constantly showed his support in the Snake Eater mission. And you're honestly telling me that despite him only having one game at that time to develop character, he's the one that started all of the events in every single Metal Gear game? That's extremely hard to believe. Oh, and something I didn't mention in the Metal Gear Solid 1 review was that the reason Gray Fox was a cyborg ninja was because he had horrible experiments done on him by someone named Dr. Clark, who, as Eva reveals to be, is actually Paramedic. Just what? Paramedic was a huge movie geek who took care of Snake and told him how to heal his wounds. And yet you're expecting me to believe that she was the mad scientist who did those experiments on Gray Fox? Bullshit! What terrible writing! That's 2 awful twists in just one cutscene. Did Kojima even think about this when he was writing this game? It's not like you can just jump in at Guns of the Patriots as your first game and take everything in. It assumes that you've already played the other ones. And if you haven't, you're probably gonna get pretty damn confused. Jesus Christ, my head hurts! So after that huge kick to the nuts, little robots called Dwarf Gecko come in and attack Eva and her resistance members. So she and Snake need to escape with Big Boss's body and have a large shootout while Frog Soldiers and Raging Raven's minions try and take them down. I suppose I really should talk about the boss fights against the Beauty and the Beast Corps, shouldn't I? Well, the one against Laughing Octopus is more or less a puzzle boss because she occasionally tries to gun you down, but mostly hides in certain places and takes on different forms, like a fake Mark II or Naomi as one of the Frog Soldiers.
It's another mimic! Watch out, Snake!
Oh, really? I hadn't noticed. Laughing Octopus definitely packs quite a punch if she manages to land a hit on you, but you should have enough healing items at this point in the game to help you. She's also quite a bit of a bullet sponge, so don't be surprised if you take a while to defeat her. Raging Raven is really annoying. It's very hard to tell which one is her out of all of her minions, and she moves way too quickly for you to keep up. She does stay still from time to time, but you can't take too long to shoot, otherwise she'll throw rockets at you, throwing you off guard. There also isn't that much space to fight her, which makes it really hard to dodge her attacks. Like with Octopus, the Raging Raven fight shouldn't be that much of a problem if you have a lot of healing items, but still, that's bad design, and it makes me dislike Chapter 3 more than I already do. Crying Wolf to me is definitely the best of the B&B fights. It's sort of a cross between the battle against Sniper Wolf and the end, except this time it's confined to only one big area, which I think is quite an improvement, and the harsh weather conditions make it very intense, although the night vision on the Solid Eye does sort of ruin it a bit, and I don't think the inclusion of Frog Soldiers looking for Snake was totally necessary. It's a pretty cool battle though, and thankfully doesn't last anywhere near as long as the one against the end. Lastly, Screaming Mantis is about as complex as Laughing Octopus, if not less. Like in that fight, she's pretty much a puzzle boss, and once you know what to do, it shouldn't take too much time to beat her. She's definitely more interesting to fight than Raging Raven, but not by a whole lot. Each beast you defeat will reveal the beauty inside, where all they'll do is just walk sinisterly towards you and literally hug for dear life. Yeah, deadly hugs. One thing you can do while fighting the beauties is play a certain song on your iPod to make them dance to the beat, in addition to being able to host a photo shoot. Oh good, I don't need to play 300 stupid VR missions in order to do it. When you take down the beauties, Drebin then rather abruptly gives us their backstories. Not tales as long as time, but they are pretty similar to each other and is the only thing Drebin really does as a character. So he's not useful in the slightest, since I'm sure the B&B members would have been perfectly capable and most likely would have been more powerful if they were to explain their past themselves rather than relying on Drebin to tell us. Anyway, after you finish off Raging Raven, Snake and Eva come across Liquid again, and unfortunately he's already gotten Big Boss's body and gained access to the Patriot system by using his genetic structure, and by piecing together the broken GWAI from Sons of Liberty. Meryl and the US military forces then arrive to stop him just as he's about to escape, but their weapons and helicopters jam just as soon as they're about to shoot Liquid down, meaning he has total control of all weapons, renaming the system Guns of the Patriots. Liquid and the Frog Soldiers then go on a killing spree while burning Big Boss's body and causing Eva to go after him. And to finish off, he makes everybody lose their minds again using the nanomachines. This is all except for Johnny, who ends up saving Meryl from drowning and forms a relationship with her. Okay, so Snake saves Meryl's life twice in Metal Gear Solid 1 by resisting Ocelot's torture and stopping Rex and Liquid, yet she ends up leaving him in the next game. Johnny, on the other hand, has had barely any interaction with Meryl throughout the entire series, keeping in mind that she's despised him up until this point, but he immediately gets to first base with her after saving her one time that a lifeguard could have easily done. What happened, Meryl? You weren't as interesting as the other characters in the original game, but you at least had a spunky and likable personality to you. Now you're an aggressive, indecisive bimbo. Johnny's character completely changes too as soon as he reveals the mask. He no longer craps himself after that, and he's suddenly a lot more brave, noble, and less dopey compared to earlier in the game and other entries in the series. Sadly, as you can see, he's also been given a much larger role this time around. I don't know what the hell Kojima was thinking, but for some twisted reason, he wanted to further develop this reoccurring joke character and have him as part of the main plot. Unsurprisingly, this fails tremendously. He's not that interesting, he's not that likable, and Kojima should be slapped across the face for coming up with this.
Won't be able to see the Missouri until they surface.
Nicely done, Meryl. Great choice for a boyfriend. Good lord, I still have 2 more chapters to talk about. Liquid's next plan is to destroy a satellite that holds the core AI of the Patriot system called JD. However, since GW isn't capable of launching nukes and he needs one that doesn't have an ID tag, this means that he has to use Metal Gear Rex's railgun. Where is Rex now? You guessed it, back in Shadow Moses Island. After a pretty cool dream sequence of playing Metal Gear Solid 1 briefly, Snake arrives in Shadow Moses and proceeds to look for Rex. Chapter 4 definitely makes up for the atrocity of the last one, mostly because it has a much higher focus on sneaking than any of the other chapters we've been through so far. Shadow Moses is pretty much dead and frozen, so there aren't any guards to sneak by, but this time carefully place Gecko and hordes of Dwarf Gecko in almost every room. You really can't afford to be caught by either of them, because normal Gecko are pretty tough to destroy and can hit seriously freaking hard, while Dwarf Gecko move incredibly fast and love to swarm you in large numbers. It can still be pretty frustrating to get by them undetected, particularly in this part here, but if you study their patterns and make good use of the Octo camo, I don't think you should have too much trouble. I really love the way Shadow Moses looks in this. You don't go through the whole of it, but the layout has been untouched. It's very isolated and clearly aged with its blue, cold, decaying walls and dim lighting. In fact, one of the first things you'll come across is a broken camera, and the music that plays on the helipad is the best is yet to come from the original Metal Gear Solid. The snow effects are also fantastic, and I like how it's able to completely obscure your vision and put yourself in Snake's shoes. It's just a shame that it wasn't used to its full potential in the Crying Wolf fight. Metal Gear Solid 4 in general is pretty good looking for an early PS3 game. It definitely takes advantage of the added memory on the Blu-ray disc, making the environments and character models look more realistic than ever before. Crucial plot points are also no longer waited until a big codec conversation pops up. It's all done in animation, and I applaud the animators for getting so much done, especially since the mouth movements perfectly match with the dialogue this time. I don't know why it took them 4 games to get it right, but regardless, it's a nice improvement. I just wish the same could be said about the frame rate. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's terrible, but it could have been a lot better. It's mostly apparent in some of the cutscenes, especially in the mission briefings, but I don't know why Konami thought this was fine. It's very distracting, and considering that the game's running on a Blu-ray disc, I expected it to be smoother than this. The music is alright, but I can't exactly hum any of it. It's a bit too atmospheric for my liking, and out of the entire soundtrack, I only like 3 themes. One of them obviously being The Best Is Yet To Come, MGS4's main theme in the first half of the credits, and a song that plays in the second half called Here's to You, composed by Ennio Morricone himself. Okay, well, it was originally for an Italian film called Seiko and Vanzetti, but the inclusion of it in Guns of the Patriots is still pretty damn cool. That's about it in terms of songs I like in this game though. The others I either find dull or just not that catchy. Yeah, that's including the old Snake theme. I don't know, it just doesn't stick with me for some reason. Back to the story, when Snake eventually reaches Metal Gear Rex's hangar, Vamp enters the room along with Naomi, who's been back with Liquid's army since Chapter 3. Without any hesitation, Vamp requests for a boss battle, and we get just that. However, like with Screaming Mantis, Vamp is mainly a puzzle boss, except even easier to pull off. All you need to do is lower his health and inject him with a syringe that Naomi gave to you earlier to suppress the nanomachines. Raiden then comes in and dukes it out with Vamp while Snake fends off against an army of Gecko. I feel sorry for the animators though, putting so much work into the battle against Raiden and Vamp, and I can only get brief glimpses of it before more Gecko show up. Anyway, Raiden eventually finishes off Vamp, and Naomi explains that the reason he keeps surviving attacks is because his nanomachines work very quickly to heal up any wounds. And then, believe it or not, the game actually tries to make us feel sorry for him. Trust me, that's a lot harder to do than it sounds. Vamp has already been set up to probably be the most unlikable character in the entire series. Even Raiden in this game has a lot more to sympathize about. So after seeing Vamp get a disgusting amount of enjoyment from butchering others, we're suddenly meant to feel sad for him? Yeah, good try game, but I ain't falling for it. However, it seems that Vamp isn't the only one with nanomachines saving their lives. Naomi all this time has had aggressive cancer, and her nanomachines are the only thing keeping her alive, which she quickly suppresses, killing her in the process, and leaving Otacon a weeping mess yet again. Not long after though, he and his new Mark III manage to reactivate Rex, and now we actually get to control the thing while we escape and wipe out an army of Gecko along the way. This is awesome. Once we're outside, Liquid arrives with his Metal Gear Ray unit from Sons of Liberty, and we have to duke it out and see whose mech is better. Surprisingly, this is the closest you come to fighting a Metal Gear in this game. There isn't even anything to replace it, like the Shagohod did in Snake Eater. But regardless, this fight against Ray is downright amazing. Rex has an incredibly powerful machine gun in addition to a huge amount of missiles that can lock on enemies and a laser that can be charged for a bigger blow. It also has a kick and dash ability, but I don't tend to use these too often. They feel a bit stiff, which I guess is to be expected considering that we're controlling a giant robot. Ray puts up quite a fight compared to its debut in Metal Gear Solid 2. It moves around much more than it did before, and its attacks can do a lot of damage. I imagine there will be a close call on your first playthrough. Once Ray is defeated, Liquid escapes in his new cruiser called Outer Haven, complete with his own Mount Snakemore. He then tries to crush Snake with the Haven, however Raiden comes to the rescue at the cost of cutting off his arm, before supposedly being crushed to death by Liquid. Cut to the 5th and final chapter on Mei Ling's own cruiser. The last mission is to simply go on board Outer Haven and stop Liquid from using Rex's railgun to destroy JD. Drebin unlocks the ID tags off of everybody's guns and then they're catapulted onto the Haven, but Johnny doesn't seem to make it and falls into the ocean. This is the last bit of sneaking you do in the game, and it's almost as much of a pain in the ass as following the Resistance member in Chapter 3. The reason being is because of the damn frog soldiers, and while there are plenty of different paths you can take, there's still a 90% chance that you'll be spotted by at least one. Either because they have ridiculously good vision, or they'll just jump out of nowhere and not allow you any time to hide.
Snake! What happened? Snake?
Just when you think you've figured out a pattern for the guards, there's always going to be something that you miss. And if it's not the frog soldiers that'll get you, it's the couple of Gecko on the other side. Look how ridiculously close I am to it. Is this really how they intended for you to sneak by in this part? That's very bad enemy placement. After that, it's the Screaming Mantis fight, which I've already covered, except for her possessing Meryl a couple of times again, like in the original. Defeating her, however, reveals a familiar face. The ghost of Psycho Mantis is apparently the one who has been controlling the B&B members the entire time. Now, it is nice to see him again, but the inclusion of him here doesn't make a lot of sense. Just before he died back in Metal Gear Solid 1, he decided that he should use his psychokinetic powers to do good deeds if he ever got another chance. Well, here he is again, and he's completely thrown that chance out the window. He doesn't stick around for that long either, thanks to the power of modern hardware. Once he realizes that, he just sort of disappears. Okay, anyway, Snake is just about to reach the hallway to GW, but not before we see that Raiden somehow survived and is perfectly capable of fighting oncoming frog soldiers. Frankly, I think it would have been better if Raiden had died, since it could have actually been quite sad to see such a tragic character go. But I guess Konami realized that there could have been a potential spin-off series. Before we head to GW, we come to what is possibly the stupidest scene ever put in a Metal Gear Solid game. Johnny and Meryl proposing to each other. Oh, where do I begin with this? It already boggles my mind as to how Johnny got back on the Haven so quickly and Meryl finds out that he doesn't have nanomachines injected into him, yet somehow he still has a really good aim. But is this really what you expected to see after just watching the previous cutscenes?
Is there something wrong with me?
No, I'd just rather do things my way. Johnny, marry me.
It changes the mood, it changes the pacing, they barely know each other, it has no connection whatsoever to the earlier scenes. This is just painful.
And I want a real wedding. With flowers and a cake.
Really, Meryl? A tough gal like you and you want a flowery wedding? Okay. Anyway, Snake now has to go through a room full of microwaves to reach GW. This is essentially the torture scene of the game, which requires you to mash the hell out of the triangle button while Snake slowly and grudgingly goes through this massive hallway. The torture segment in Metal Gear Solid 1 was already well put together, making you go through the same pain that Snake is suffering, but this just brings it to a whole new level, and the inclusion of seeing all the major protagonists struggle to survive is a nice touch. The only thing that completely ruins it is that when you do reach GW, Otacon's robot is to be the one to upload a virus, which makes me wonder what the whole point of Snake being there is. You could argue that it's because he needs to protect the Mark III from the swarm of dwarf gecko that shortly come in, but we've seen before that it's able to use stealth camouflage at will, so why doesn't the Mark III just use it again here? Ah hell, this video is already too long as it is, let's just get on with it. Once the upload is complete, a video message from Naomi pops up where she explains that the worm cluster that they just put in, called Fox Alive, was altered by her and Sunny. And not only does it manage to destroy GW, but also the other AI cores and the entire Patriot system. Wait, wasn't that what Liquid was planning to do anyway? Whatever. Snake loses consciousness but is taken to the top of Outer Haven, where Liquid Ocelot gives out the horrible and unconvincing cliche of letting him win, and he then challenges Snake to one last fight to end the war. These guys surprisingly have a lot of stamina for this. They spend around 5 minutes beating the crap out of each other in cutscene form, and they still continue to duke it out when it comes to the final boss battle. It's a very similar approach to the Liquid fight at MGS1, except a little more complex this time. Snake can now block attacks and perform various punches that have different speeds and do different amounts of damage. Liquid Ocelot also changes his tactics as you lower his health to fit with the past games. For example, at the start of the battle, he and Snake only have a health bar like in the original Solid game, but both of them will eventually get a stamina meter to take advantage of like in Snake Eater. And like the boss in Snake Eater, Ocelot can hurt pretty badly if he manages to land a few blows on you, which I'm glad it does considering who we're facing against and how far we are into the timeline. This Rock'em Sock'em Grandpa's moment is the last thing the player does, but the ending still takes 30 minutes of the game, which thankfully can be summed up in a few sentences. Liquid is finally out of Ocelot's body as soon as he does one more iconic gesture and passes away. Campbell reconciles with Meryl while she and Johnny get married. Raiden reunites with Rose and his new son. Sunny can finally go outside and live a normal life along with Otacon. And Snake puts himself to rest before he can do any harm with the mutated Foxdie virus. And that concludes Metal Gear Solid 4 and the entire series. As the credits roll, let me sum up all of my thoughts about this game. Hold on, when did Big Boss show up? What, huh? There's still more?
Big Boss.
And you've brought back Big Boss? How long is this cutscene? 28 minutes? We still have 28 minutes left to go? What else do you need to show? You finished the game off just fine. I mean, yeah, we're left wondering what happened to Major Zero at the end, but some of us could probably assume that he's already dead. Okay then, so Snake has stopped himself from committing suicide, and after Big Boss gives him a CQC hug, he basically explains everything that Eva's already told us about what happened after the Snake Eater mission. And the body that Eva had was actually solid as Snake from Sons of Liberty. Oh, that's probably not a good way for Eva to go. And if you're wondering how the hell he managed to survive his ordeals in Metal Gear 2, well, apparently his body has been reconstructed using parts of Liquid and Solidus, essentially making him Frankensnake. In addition to that, however, Ocelot decided to use his nanomachines and hypnotherapy to implant the persona of Liquid into his brain and trick the Sons of the Patriot system into thinking that he's actually him. Come on, would you honestly be convinced that Ocelot is actually Liquid? He doesn't really portray the same attitude and mannerisms that Liquid had before, and sticking with Ocelot's voice doesn't help either. That brings up another question. How come it was the same voice actor for Liquid at the end of Sons of Liberty, but it suddenly changes to Ocelot's in Guns of the Patriots? I know, that's a huge nitpick, but it's something I thought I'd bring up. Anyway, when Snake and Otacon uploaded the virus into the Patriots network back in Chapter 5, that allowed Big Boss to locate Major Zero and bring him to Snake in a vegetative state, just so he could pull the plug on him while he watched. Big Boss then tells Snake that the injection that Drebin gave him in the beginning of the game is another form of the Foxdie virus that targets members of the Patriots, which is the real reason why Eva and Ocelot died, and obviously this will include Big Boss as well. And after milking the saluting scene from Snake Eater some more, it turns out that this same Foxdie virus from Drebin has replaced the mutated form that would have caused Snake to be a biological weapon. Though there's still no promise of him living much longer anyway. Shouldn't that have been something Naomi could have told him about? The Foxdie virus kills off Big Boss next to his mentor's grave, and that, finally, concludes Metal Gear Solid 4 and the entire series. Finishing the game once just gives you different colored combat vests, which don't really help that much. And of course the tuxedo to make yourself look smart in the middle of a war zone. There's quite a bit to unlock in this game. But aside from the bandana and stealth camouflage, it's mostly different weapons that you'll likely only get by playing the game multiple times and achieving certain ranks, which require you to meet a ridiculous amount of conditions. For example, in order to obtain Eva's Mauser from Snake Eater, you have to earn the Hound emblem, which requires you to finish the game on one of the harder difficulties with no deaths, less than 3 alert phases, no kills, no recovery items, no stealth camouflage or bandana, and in under 5.5 hours. And then there's the boss's Patriot gun, where you need to earn the best emblem in the game, the Big Boss emblem. It's very similar to how you get the Hound one, except you can't get caught at all, and you have to complete the game in less than 5 hours. Screw that, I'm just gonna put in the passwords and get it instantly. What's that? You want me to do a playthrough where I have to slice 50 guards' throats so I can unlock the Altair costume from the Assassin's Creed series? Well, I personally don't care for the Assassin's Creed games that much, so let's put in the passcode. What's that? You want me to buy 60 weapons from Drebin so I can unlock his face camo, which I'll most likely never use? Well, considering how expensive some of these weapons are and how many playthroughs I'll need to do in order to earn 60 weapons, let's just go ahead and put in the passcode. Guys, seriously, it's not worth going through the game that many times to unlock everything. It's because of the codes that I managed to unlock the SOCOM pistol from the original Metal Gear Solid. It's because of the codes that I got some hidden iPod songs, and it's because of the codes that I obtained the boss's Patriot gun and I got to hear part of the Snake Eater theme song while I aimed. The only weapon that you can't use passcodes on is the solar gun that's unlocked by tranquilizing the beasts and frog soldiers you fight alongside Meryl. Afterwards, you just need to search and collect their statues and then you're done. The solar gun is pretty much an upgraded tranquilizer pistol. You can charge it up for a stronger blast and knock out guards more easily, but don't use it too much in a dark area because you can only recharge it by holding it up to the sun.
Sunlight!
Unlike Sons of Liberty and Snake Eater, there's no bizarre minigame you can play, and there used to be an online multiplayer feature that was brought over from Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, but unfortunately the server's contract had expired in 2012, so Konami had to shut everything down and permanently remove the multiplayer option. I don't think a lot of people cared too much about this though, and if they did, Peace Walker would quench their thirst in 2010 on the PSP and in 2012 on the HD collection. So that was Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, and while the gameplay for the most part was pretty fun, the story definitely needed some work. Alright, I know I've been pretty negative about the story throughout the entire review, but honestly, some of it just pisses me off for all the wrong reasons, especially since it's taken itself more seriously than the previous games. It's as if Kojima took every single fan demand of how they thought the series should have ended and scrambled it up into one cluttered mess. Like turning the supporting cast of Snake Eater into villains, the horribly contrived Meryl and Johnny relationship, or having Psycho Mantis make a brief and pointless cameo. I'm really disappointed that they wussed out at Snake's and Raiden's death. I was surprisingly distraught when I saw them supposedly die, but then I felt completely cheated when it turned out that they were still alive. The whole game was built up to put Snake to rest, but Kojima seemed to be too worried that fans wouldn't appreciate their favorite character dying when it really would have been very emotional and powerful. Even with that said though, I wouldn't classify this as one of the worst stories in video games or anything. I think if they maybe waited for a future game and allowed the characters more time to interact with each other, then this could have worked out fine. I've certainly seen worse stories in other video games, and I've definitely come across some awful ways to conclude a franchise. From a gameplay standpoint, however, aside from Chapter 3, it's still a great Metal Gear game. Sure, there's a lot more shooting and action in this one, but the sneaking elements are still there. In fact, returning the Shadow Moses is probably my favorite part of the game. I also really love the addition of the Octo Camo and smoother control. Snake Eater already made me feel like I could do almost anything, but Guns of the Patriots has absolutely perfected the way Snake handles in this game. Even so, I imagine that the increase on cutscene length and abundance might turn off even the most patient of gamers. As I've said, I don't find them to be that bad, but even I found a good number of the dialogue to be pretty pointless. It can be pretty annoying when there are 1 or 2 characters who complete a sentence in 25 words when they could have simplified it to just 6, and even then it's probably a metaphor or something. If you like the story, that's fine. You probably see something in it that I don't. But can I recommend this as anybody's first Metal Gear game? Hell no. They would be confused beyond belief. If you want to make a lick of sense out of the story, it's better that you play the other games first and come back to this one. But if you don't particularly care about the story and are more interested in the gameplay, this is a good one to try out. I still like Snake Eater more, but I'm glad I finally got a chance to play this. I had a good time. With that said, I'll give Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots an 8.5 out of 10. Standing for, this is a good movie. Can't wait for them to make a game about it. And that, folks, is the end of the Metal Gear Solid Marathon. Once again, I apologize dearly for this video being so long, but you can rest easy now, it's finally over. Believe me, it was hard for me too. Never again will I do another marathon like this. But I still really love these games, and Snake will always remain as a classic video game hero to me. I will continue to play these games to this day, and I hope these reviews have convinced you to try them out. I'm looking very much forward to the Phantom Pain, which already looks pretty damn awesome. My name's Josh Smith, I praise the treasure and I pick apart the trash. Okay, so what do we have next? You know what? I think it's time to review a movie again. Now, let's see, last time we did a disaster film based on a true story, so how about this time we compare a remake to the original film and see how they both fare out. I will see you guys next time with the remake of Carrie. Lee Merriweather, why does she sound so familiar? Holy crap, she's Catwoman!
Oh, you're going to see the perfect crime when I get Batman in my claws.